I woke up at first light, as I had done for the last 40 years of my life. Even when I retired, I couldn't get out of the habit of getting up at 6 in the morning. 67 is not an age when you can easily change your daily routine. Today was my birthday. Not a round date, nothing special. Just another year added to the long line of years I'd lived. I didn't like big celebrations. A modest dinner with my son and daughter-in-law was all I wanted for the day. I walked slowly into the kitchen of my small apartment. 2 rooms and a tiny kitchen in an old house near downtown Santa Fe was all that remained of Robert and me together. My husband had died 8 years ago, and I had lived alone ever since. Fletcher and Martha promised to be here by 5 o'clock that evening. I had plenty of time to prepare a special dinner: rosemary roasted chicken, potato gratin, and avocado salad. For dessert, blueberry pie, Fletcher's favorite dessert since childhood. Although in recent years he rarely admitted to liking my cooking. Martha was into fancy diets and often criticized the heavy food I cooked. I sighed, glancing at the clock. 11 in the morning, time to head to the store for groceries. I carefully combed my hair in front of the mirror, applying some lipstick, another habit I was unwilling to give up. The supermarket was full of people. I leisurely picked out the freshest produce. In my years as a nurse, I'd gotten used to being meticulous about everything. When I got home, I started cooking. I always found comfort in this process. The monotonous, familiar movements were soothing. By 4 o'clock, everything was ready. The chicken was languishing in the oven, filling the apartment with the aroma of rosemary and garlic. The pie was cooling on the windowsill. I set the table with my best plates, the ones my mother had left me, with delicate floral designs around the edge. At 4:45, I changed into the dark blue dress I'd bought especially for the day. Nothing fancy, just a modest knee-length dress with long sleeves. 5 o'clock, 5:15, 5:30. The phone was silent. I glanced nervously at my watch, fighting the growing irritation. They were always late. There was always some pressing reason. At 15 to 6, the bell rang. I took a deep breath before picking up the phone. "Mom, we're on our way." Fletcher's voice sounded tense. "Martha got held up at work, you know. It's a day off, but it's an important client." "Of course I understand." I tried to speak calmly. "The chicken is waiting for you in the oven. We'll be there in 20 minutes. They arrived at 7:30. Fletcher looked so much like his father. The same dark hair, the same firm chin. But the eyes were mine, light blue, like a summer sky. Now those eyes were looking somewhere past me. "Happy birthday, Mom." He gave me a quick hug and made his way into the apartment. Martha followed him, holding a small package wrapped in shiny paper. "Norma, dear, I'm sorry I'm late. These customers totally misunderstand the concept of a weekend." She pecked my cheek. "Wow, that smells delicious. I hope it's something low-calorie. I'm on a new diet." Dinner began in tense silence. I put the food on my plate, trying not to notice Martha pushing the potato slices aside. "How was work, Fletcher?" I asked, breaking the silence. "Busy," he sipped his wine. "The last quarter's been crazy. We took on some big new clients." "Is that good?" "Of course it's good, Mom. More clients, more commissions." The conversation wasn't going well. I told a couple of stories from the hospital where I sometimes volunteered, but I noticed that neither son nor daughter-in-law was listening. Fletcher was checking something on his phone, and Martha was absent-mindedly picking at her food. "How are you guys doing?" I tried again. "What's new?" "Oh, you won't believe what our neighbor Caroline's been up to." Martha perked up. "She's been renovating the bathroom and hiring some crooks. Now they've got a leak that's threatening our ceiling." Martha spent the next 20 minutes detailing the neighbor's perfidy and her distress over the possible damage to the Italian stucco, which cost a fortune. Fletcher interjected occasional commentary, cheering his wife on. After the main course, I brought blueberry pie. Fletcher's eyes lit up for a moment. He'd always loved my baked goods, but when he looked at his wife, he frowned. "Mom, You know Martha doesn't eat pastries. Oh, I remember. But I thought you might have a bite for my birthday. Martha pressed her lips together, but didn't say anything. Fletcher reluctantly took a small piece of pie. Yeah, I guess so. By the way, there's something we wanted to talk to you about. I felt something inside me clench. I knew that tone. It was the way Fletcher talked when he was about to say something unpleasant or ask for money. What business? Fletcher put down his fork and looked at me. You see, Martha and I have been reviewing our investment strategy. In the current economic climate, we need to diversify our portfolio. I blinked. Financial jargon always bored me. What does that mean? It means, Martha interjected, that we need to invest in a variety of assets, not only in securities, but also in real estate. Fletcher nodded. Exactly, and we thought your apartment might be a great investment. My apartment? I asked, not sure I understood correctly. Yes, Fletcher said in a businesslike tone. We're offering you the apartment to Martha. It would be a win-win for everyone. You'll get rid of the estate tax, and we'll have an asset we can use as collateral for a larger investment. I slowly set down my cup of tea. My hands were trembling slightly. But where will I live? Martha smiled dazzlingly. That's exactly what we wanted to talk about. You see, this apartment is too big for one person. You could move into something more suited to your needs. Move? I felt a lump coming up in my throat. Where? Fletcher and Martha looked at each other. There are several options, Fletcher began carefully. Senior housing, for example. They have all the amenities, medical staff. A senior center? I couldn't believe my ears. You want to send me to a nursing home? Not a nursing home, Mom, Fletcher grumbled. A modern apartment complex for people your age. There'll be socialization, recreation, and you won't have to worry about everyday problems, Martha added. Cooking, cleaning, everything will be taken care of. I stared at them, trying to realize what was happening. My own son, on my birthday, suggests that my apartment be taken away and sent to an orphanage, and he's making it sound like he cares. I don't want to move, I said quietly. This is my home. It's your father's and mine. Fletcher sighed. Mom, be reasonable. This apartment isn't just a house. It's an asset, one that's being used inefficiently right now. Think of the future. Whose future? I asked, feeling the anger building inside me. Our future together. Fletcher raised his voice. You're not getting any younger. Who's going to take care of you in 5 years? 10 years from now? Martha and I work full time. We don't have the opportunity to come and check on you all the time. I take care of myself just fine, I replied, and I plan to keep taking care of myself. Martha put her hand on my shoulder. Honey, no one doubts your independence, but you have to think ahead while you're still. She hesitated. She hesitated. While you can still make decisions. I dropped her hand. What does that mean? We're just worried, Fletcher quickly interjected. You live alone. No one checks to see if you've taken your meds, turned off the stove. I'm 67, not 97. I was indignant. I've been a nurse for 30 years. I know exactly how to take my medication and turn off the stove. The atmosphere at the table grew hot. Fletcher looked at me with ill-concealed irritation. Look, Mom. His voice grew harsher. We're trying to keep things civilized. But don't forget that I spent a lot of money renovating this apartment 5 years ago. I installed new windows, replaced the plumbing. It was an investment, and now I want a return on that investment. You said it was a gift, I said quietly, for my 60th birthday. It was a help. Fletcher thumped his palm on the table. And now I'm asking for more help. Martha and I want to expand our business, and we need startup capital. Your apartment is the perfect solution. I was silent, looking at my hands. Old hands with protruding veins and age spots. Hands that had washed Fletcher's diapers, cooked his meals, worked on his broken knees. I'll think about it, I finally said. I need time. Martha glanced nervously at her watch. Sure, Norma. No one's rushing you into a decision. But the sooner we finalize the deal, the better for everyone. Fletcher got up from the table. We should go. We have to get up early tomorrow. Martha has an important meeting with a client. They left with the haste of people who were just waiting for the right moment to leave. Martha remembered the present and held it out to me. Happy birthday, dear mother-in-law. I unwrapped the package. Inside was a silk scarf with a floral print. Thank you, it's beautiful. I smiled, strained. Think about our offer, Fletcher reminded me, kissing my cheek. It's a win-win for all of us. When the door closed behind them, I stood motionless in the hallway for a few moments, then slowly returned to the table with the remains of the holiday dinner, uneaten pie, half-empty glasses, and a gift, a scarf I would never wear. I mechanically began to clear the table. I put the dishes in the sink, wrapped the leftovers in foil, wiped the table. Habitual actions helped me not to think about what had just happened. But when everything was put away, the thoughts returned. My own son wanted to evict me from the house, take away the last thing I had left, the roof over my head, all under the pretense of caring about my future. I went into the bedroom and opened the dresser drawer where I kept my family photos. The album was heavy with a worn leather cover. I sat down on the bed and began flipping through the pages. Here's Fletcher's newborn. Here's his first day of school. Graduation, college, his wedding to Martha. The pictures from the last few years were mostly of family gatherings. I was surprised to notice a pattern. Most of the pictures of me were of me at work. Here I am cooking a Thanksgiving turkey. Here I am washing dishes after Christmas. Here I am helping Martha hang curtains in their new house. I was never the center of attention in any of these pictures. Always in the background, always in the process of serving others. Not a family member with whom to share joy, but rather a function. A handy mother, a cook, a cleaner, a source of financial support. And now that the last thing required of me, my home, they didn't even bother to disguise their true motives. No concern for my well-being, just diversifying my investment portfolio. I closed the album and looked out the window at Santa Fe at night. The city lights twinkled in the darkness like stars. I'd lived here all my life. And now what? Live out my life in a state institution where my own children want to turn me in? No, I thought, and the word rang in my head with unexpected firmness. For the first time in years, I felt anger, not irritation, not resentment, but real burning anger. I didn't deserve to be treated like this. No one does. The morning after my birthday was overcast. I woke up with a headache and a heavy feeling in my chest. The events of last night kept replaying in my head like a broken record. Fletcher's demand for the apartment, Martha's hints about my supposedly incipient dementia, and that fake tone of concern, underneath which was nothing but greed. I forced myself out of bed, though I wanted more than anything to cover myself with a blanket and pretend nothing had happened. I made myself a strong cup of coffee and sat by the window, watching the rain beat down on the glass. What could I do against their plan? I had neither the energy nor the will to start a family war. Direct confrontation had never been my style. In my years as a nurse, I'd learned to resolve conflicts quietly and effectively. But now it was about my home, my future. After a second cup of coffee, my brain began to work more clearly. I decided to approach the problem methodically, as I had always done. The first step was to assess my financial situation. I pulled out a folder of bank records. Fletcher had insisted years ago that I switch to online banking, but I still preferred paper statements. Arranging them by date on the kitchen table, I began to analyze my spending over the past 5 years. What I saw made me wince. The numbers didn't lie. I had loaned Fletcher and Martha almost a third of my savings over the past few years. $2,000 for new furniture, $4,000 for a bathroom remodel, $8,000 for a vacation in Europe, which they called their second honeymoon, and the largest amount, $20,000 for a down payment on their house 4 years ago. I remembered the day they came to me with plans to buy a house, a large mansion in an upscale neighborhood with 4 bedrooms and a garden. "We need a place for future children, Mom," Fletcher had said then. I gave almost everything I had, delighting in the thought of grandchildren who would fill that house with laughter, grandchildren who have never been spoken of since. I denied myself many things for their sake, didn't go on the cruise I dreamed of. I didn't update my closet. I even put off dental work, telling myself it could wait. Meanwhile, they bought designer furniture, went on expensive vacations, changed cars every 2 years, and none of these loans were ever paid back. Whenever I gently reminded them of the debt, Fletcher waved it away. "Mom, you're not going to spend that money. They work better in our business. It'll all be your inheritance someday." Inheritance? It's like I'm already dead and they're just taking what they think is rightfully theirs. And now they want the apartment. I made myself another coffee and opened the morning paper, trying to distract myself from my gloomy thoughts. Flipping through the local news pages, I reached the real estate section, and then my eye caught a small ad in the corner of the page. Cozy house for sale on the outskirts of Santa Fe. 2 bedrooms, kitchen living room, 6 acres. Quiet location with mountain views, suitable for lovers of privacy and nature. I read the ad more carefully. The price was much lower than I had expected. Of course, the house was on the outskirts of the city, far from the center where my apartment was. But wasn't that a plus? Away from Fletcher and Martha, from their constant demands and complaints. The very thought of having my own house and lot seemed both daunting and tantalizing. At 67, starting over, would I be able to cope with the upkeep of the house? On the other hand, all my life I had dreamed of a small garden where I could grow vegetables and flowers. I cut out the ad and attached it to the refrigerator with a magnet. Then I opened my laptop and started searching for information about the cost of apartments in my neighborhood. What I saw surprised me. Prices had almost doubled in the last 5 years. My neighborhood has become trendy among young professionals who want to live close to downtown. If the online appraisal was to be believed, my apartment was worth considerably more than Fletcher had said. He claimed it could sell for $80,000 at the most. But according to the market, the price was much higher, enough to buy that house on the outskirts and still have enough left over to live comfortably. A thought began to form. Not to fight Fletcher and Martha, not to try to change their minds, just disappear from their sight. Sell the apartment, but not to them, on the open market. Buy a house and start a new life. The phone rang, interrupting my musings. It was Fletcher. "Mom, have you thought about our conversation last night?" he asked without preamble. "Good morning, son," I replied. "Yes, I've been thinking about it." "And what have you decided?" "I need more time, Fletcher. It's a big decision." "Of course, Mom." I could hear the impatience in his voice. "But don't take too long. Martha and I are already looking at options for your future home. There's a great boarding house not too far from here." I clutched the phone so tight my knuckles turned white. "I'll let you know when I make a decision," I said as calmly as I could. "I'll call you tomorrow. I'll call you back tomorrow." After talking to my son, I felt like I had to act fast. They clearly weren't going to put their plans on hold. The first thing I did was call the number on the listing. A woman who identified herself as Realtor Diane Cortez answered. We made an appointment for the next day. Then I contacted a lawyer. Henry Summers had handled our family's affairs during Robert's lifetime. He was as old as I was, but still had a keen mind and business acumen. "Norma, dear, it's good to hear from you," he said when I called his office. "What can I do for you?" "I need a real estate consultation, Henry, and complete confidentiality." "Of course. When would be a good time for you to meet?" The sooner the better. Come by this afternoon. Say 3. I will, thank you. At 3L, I was already in Henry's office. His office was in an old building downtown and retained an old school atmosphere wood paneling, leather chairs, bookcases filled with legal volumes. So, Norma, what's going on? Henry asked, offering me a cup of tea. I told him about the conversation with Fletcher and Martha, about their plans for my apartment, about the nursing home they wanted to send me to. Bastards, Henry, normally reserved, said quietly when I was done. Pardon the expression, but this is just unacceptable. I don't want conflict, Henry, I said. I just want to protect myself. And you're doing the right thing. So, you want to sell the apartment and buy a house? Yes, and I need to know how to do it quickly and quietly. Well, the first step is to get a realistic estimate of your condo's value. Henry and I spent the next hour strategizing. He recommended a reliable realtor to sell the condo other than the one I'd arranged to see the house with. We discussed the legal aspects of the transactions, the tax issues, the time frame. You can sell a condo and buy a house almost simultaneously, Henry explained. But there are paperwork and taxes to consider. I trust you on this, Henry. One more thing, Norma. He looked at me seriously. You might want to reconsider the will. It was a sore subject. After Robert died, I'd made a simple will, leaving everything to Fletcher. He was my only child, and despite his shortcomings, I loved him. You don't have to disinherit him completely, Henry continued, seeing my hesitation. But you can set certain conditions or divide the estate differently. Think about it. All right, I'll think about it, I nodded. But the main thing now is to settle the housing issue. I agree. Let's take it step by step. I left Henry's office with a clear plan of action and a strange sense of relief. For the first time in a long time, I was making decisions on my own, without looking to Fletcher or anyone else. The next day, I met with Diane Cortez to view the house from the ad. We agreed at a small cafe on the edge of town, from where she was to drive me to the house. Diane turned out to be an energetic middle-aged woman with a pleasant smile and a professional approach. She didn't ask too many questions or try to force her opinion on me. The place is really secluded, she warned me as we drove up the winding road toward the mountains. The nearest neighbors are a quarter-mile away. The bus doesn't run very often, so it'll be difficult without a car. I have a car, I replied, and I like quiet. The house stood on a small hill, surrounded by pine trees. It was one story, with a covered porch and an old-fashioned front porch. It wasn't new, but it was sturdy and well-maintained. When we got out of the car, I immediately felt the difference in the air. Clean, mountainous, smelling of pine needles and wild herbs. Inside the house was more spacious than I expected. A bright kitchen living room with large windows overlooking the mountains. 2 small but cozy bedrooms. Bathroom needed updating but was functional overall. Why such a low price? I asked as we toured the house. The owners are moving to another state to be with their daughter and want to sell quickly, Diane explained. Plus, the location isn't for everyone. A lot of people prefer to live closer to town. I like it here, I said as I walked out to the backyard. The lot was partially neglected, but I could see the potential. There was room for a vegetable garden, flowers, a bench under the old apple tree by the fence, a place where I could spend the sunsets of my life in peace and dignity. We discussed the details of the deal, and I put down a deposit to secure my right to buy. Diane promised to have all the paperwork ready in the next few days. The next 2 weeks passed in feverish activity. I met with a realtor recommended by Henry, and we put the apartment on the market. To my surprise, I found a buyer 3 days later, a young couple working for a technology company. They were willing to pay the asking price and didn't haggle. At the same time, I was in the process of finalizing the purchase of the house. Diane helped expedite the process, and soon all the necessary paperwork was ready. Henry advised me not to disclose my plans to anyone until the transactions were finalized. Fletcher and Martha continued to call every day, sometimes several times. I answered evasively, saying I was still thinking and weighing my options. Mom, you can't keep putting off a decision forever, Fletcher said irritably during another call. We're going to miss out on the boarding house. I didn't agree to the boarding house, Fletcher, I reminded him. But it's perfect. You'll be supervised. You won't have to take care of cooking and cleaning. I'm doing it now and I'll continue to do it. Stubbornness won't do you any good, Mom. His tone became threatening. Martha and I are only thinking of you. If you can't make a reasonable decision, we may have to do things differently. This conversation only strengthened my resolve. I expedited the process of selling the condo and buying the house, working with the realtors and the bank almost every day. Finally, all the documents were signed. The condo was sold. The house was bought. The money was transferred. My new life was waiting for me. The hardest part was deciding what to do with my things and how to disappear without alarming Fletcher immediately. After much deliberation, I devised a plan. I would pack only the essentials and personal belongings. I would leave most of the furniture behind. The new house already had basic furnishings and something I could buy later. The keys to my new life were in my purse, promising a freedom I hadn't felt in a long time. I was ready to move, ready for a fresh start. Moving day was unexpectedly sunny. I woke up early, before dawn, feeling determined and strangely calm. The day before, I had completed the last preparations. I packed the most important things, documents, photos. The rest I would either leave to the new owners or pick up later. I decided not to hire movers. The fewer people involved, the better. Fortunately, Henry offered the help of his nephew Tom with a small truck. Tom was scheduled to arrive at 8 in the morning, when Fletcher was usually already at work. I walked around the apartment saying goodbye to each room. Almost 20 years of my life had been spent here. Here Robert and I had grown old together. Here I'd been widowed. Here I'd learned to live alone. The walls held echoes of our conversations, laughter, sometimes tears. At 8 o'clock sharp, Tom arrived, a young man with a friendly smile and strong arms. Mrs. Sheldon, I'm from Uncle Henry. Ready to move out? I nodded, pointing to several boxes and 2 suitcases in the hallway. That's it? Tom wondered. Uncle said you were moving. Everything that's important is here, I answered. The rest is either already in the new house or I don't need it. We loaded the stuff into the truck and went outside. I locked the apartment door one last time and put the keys in an envelope for the new owners. The drive to the new house took about 40 minutes. We drove through town, then along the river, then started climbing into the hills. The farther we got away from the center, the freer I felt. The house looked exactly the same as when I first saw it. Simple, sturdy, with a veranda overlooking the mountains. But now it was mine. The keys Diane had handed me 2 days ago turned easily in the lock. Tom and I unloaded the stuff, and he helped me organize the boxes into rooms. Good luck to you, Mrs. Sheldon. Tom said goodbye. Uncle says you're a very brave woman. After he left, I was alone in the droning silence of the new house. For the first time in days, I could take a deep breath and relax. No one would ring the doorbell. No one would demand my attention. No one would remind me of duty and responsibility. I began slowly unpacking, settling into the space. I hung clothes in the closet, arranged books on the shelves, laid out the kitchen utensils. Every little thing in its place created a sense of order and gradually turned someone else's house into mine. In the evening, I sat on the veranda with a cup of tea and watched the sun set behind the mountains. The air was filled with the scent of pine trees and wildflowers. The silence here was different. Not oppressive, as sometimes in a city apartment, but alive, filled with the sounds of nature. I deliberately left my phone off. I knew Fletcher would call, demanding an answer about the apartment. But today, I wanted to be alone with myself, to feel out my decision. The next few days passed in a pleasant flurry of activity. I explored the neighborhood, familiarized myself with the house, planned how I would arrange the plot in the spring. In the nearest village, I found a small store where I could buy everything I needed and a bus stop for trips to the city. Every morning, I woke up with a feeling of freedom. No one told me how to spend the day. No one demanded an account of my actions. No one reminded me of my advanced age. It was up to me to decide when to get up, what to eat, what to do. On the fourth day, I finally turned on my phone. As expected, it was full of missed calls and messages from Fletcher. The tone was getting more and more irritated by the day. I sent a quick text. "Everything's fine. Busy with business. Call you later." The week in the new house flew by. I gradually got used to the new rhythm of life, to the silence, broken only by birdsong and the rustling of the wind in the pines. One of those evenings, as I sat on the veranda with a book, the phone rang loudly. Fletcher's name came up on the screen. I took a deep breath and answered it. "Where the hell are you?" His voice was so loud that I pulled the receiver away from my ear. "Hello, Fletcher," I answered calmly. "I'm fine, thanks for asking." "Mom, I was just outside your apartment. There are some people living there. They say they bought it." "Yes, they did," I confirmed. "What do you mean, yes?" He was almost shouting. "You sold the apartment? Without me knowing?" "I sold my apartment, yes. But, how could you? We discussed that you were going to sign it over to Marta. We had it all planned out." I heard in his voice not concern for my well-being, but the rage of a man whose plans had gone awry. "Fletcher, I never agreed to your plan," I said firmly. "I said I'd think about it, and I did. I decided I'd rather sell the apartment and buy a house." "What house? Where are you now?" "I bought a small house in the country. It's quiet, clean air, and I have a plot where I can grow vegetables." "In the country? Are you crazy? Living alone in the country at your age? What if you get sick? What if you fall?" He spoke to me as if I were an unintelligent child or a feeble-minded old woman. "I've lived 67 years, Fletcher, and I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself," I interrupted him. "I bought a house that I like, in a place where I want to live. That's my decision." "What about the money?" His voice suddenly changed. "How much did you get for the apartment?" "Enough to buy a house and live comfortably." "But you could have gotten a lot more if you'd consulted me." There was a clear indignation in his voice. "We could have waited for a better offer, invested the money properly." We, always we, when it came to my money. It was as if it was automatically shared, as if I had no right to manage it on my own. "I'm happy with the deal, Fletcher," I said. "I got a fair price for the apartment." "How much?" he insisted. "How much did you get for it?" "It doesn't matter." "It does? Do you realize that Martha and I were counting on that money? We had plans. We wanted to expand Martha's business, invest in a new project." "Fletcher," my voice grew colder, "I don't have to finance your business projects. It's my apartment, my money, and my life." "But we're family." There was a pleading note in his voice. "A family should help each other. I'm your son, your only child. Who better to help than me?" How easily he went from threatening to manipulative, from anger to ostentatious resentment. "I've been helping you all my life, Fletcher," I said quietly. "I've given you almost all of my savings over the years. I've babysat the non-existent grandchildren you talked about when you asked for money for a house. I've always been there for you when my help was needed, but now I have to take care of myself." "This is all Henry's doing, isn't it?" Fletcher asked suddenly. "Did that old schemer turn you against me? or did someone else? You'd never have thought of it yourself. Typical Fletcher couldn't believe his mother was capable of making an independent decision. Someone had to turn me against him. It's my decision, Fletcher, I said firmly. Do you realize what you've done? Martha and I had already planned everything. We took out a loan against the future deal. That's it. They weren't just counting on the money from my apartment, they'd already spent it, taking out a loan against a deal that existed only in their imaginations. I'm sorry you made decisions based on assumptions, I said, but I didn't promise you anything. The conversation continued for a few more minutes in the same vein. Fletcher accused me of betrayal, selfishness, ingratitude. I listened silently, not trying to justify myself. There was silence on the other end of the wire, punctuated by heavy breathing. Then Fletcher spoke in a low, threatening tone. You're going to regret this, Mom. When you're all alone, when there's no one to help you, you'll remember what I said, but it will be too late. I'm washing my hands of this. You don't have a son anymore. And he hung up. Not an hour later, the phone rang again. This time it was Martha. I thought about not answering it, but I decided I'd better get it over with. Norma, how could you? She started without greeting. Do you have any idea what you've done? Fletcher's on the verge of a nervous breakdown. Hello, Martha, I said calmly. I just sold my apartment and bought a house. I don't see why I'm having a nervous breakdown. But we were counting on that money. There was a clear indignation in her voice. We had plans. We took out a loan to expand my design studio, and now it's all gone. I never promised you that money, Martha. But you agreed to consider our offer. We took that as an agreement. That's how they interpreted my words. My "I'll think about it" automatically turned in their heads into, yes, of course, take everything I have. Think about it doesn't mean agree, I patiently explained. I've thought about it and decided that your offer doesn't work for me. We can sue, you know. Her voice suddenly turned cold. For fraud, for misrepresentation. You let us know that you agreed to the deal, and then you secretly sold the apartment. I almost laughed. Fraud? Really? You have no legal grounds for a lawsuit, Martha, I replied calmly. There were no contracts, no promises, not even verbal agreements. I never said yes to your proposal. Martha was silent for a moment, clearly changing tactics. Norma, dear, her voice turned honeyed. We can still make things right. You can sell this house, move back to the city. We'll find you a nice apartment close to us. We'll see more of each other. It's amazing how quickly she switched from threatening to coaxing, from accusation to fake concern. Just like Fletcher. Two peas in a pod. Thank you, Martha, but I like my new house, I said firmly. I'm not going to sell it. But you can't live alone this far out of town. What if something happens? I bought a house 15 minutes from the hospital. I have a phone and a car. I'm not in the middle of nowhere, Martha. There was silence on the other end of the line. Then Martha spoke in a different tone, cold and businesslike. I see you've made up your mind. Well, that's your choice, but don't expect us to come and visit you in the middle of nowhere when you're lonely. Don't expect help when you need it. You've chosen your path, now live with it. And she hung up without waiting for a reply. I sat on the veranda, looking up at the starry sky. The phone lay beside me, a silent witness to the severing of the last family ties. I was bitter not over the loss of money or material goods, but over the realization that my own son saw me only as a source of funding for his projects, that for him and his wife I was not a beloved mother, but a convenient ATM machine that could be used and then thrown away. I finally saw them for what they really were, selfish people who saw me only as a means to their ends, and that knowledge, as painful as it was liberating. Now I could live my life without looking back at their expectations and demands. Fletcher threatened to never speak to me again. Perhaps it was best for both of us, at least for a while, until the pain and anger subsided. If he ever wants to reconnect as equals, with respect and understanding, I'll be ready. And if not, well, I've learned to live alone since Robert's death. I'll learn to live without my son. It's been a month since I moved into my new home. March followed April and then May. Spring in the foothills of the Santa Fe Mountains was beautiful. Every morning I woke up to birds singing, and the air was so clean and fresh that I couldn't breathe it. I gradually got used to my new life, to its unhurried, measured pace. The first clumsy days were behind me, when I was still poorly oriented in the house, did not know where everything was, and was always looking for something. Now everything had found its place, and I had gotten so comfortable that I could find a light switch in the dark and not trip over the threshold between the kitchen and the living room. The yard was beginning to transform, too. I cleared the overgrown flower beds and planted the first vegetables: radishes, onions, carrots. I found old garden furniture in the shed, which I washed and put under the apple tree. In the evenings, she sat there with a book, watching the sun sink behind the mountains and the first stars appear in the darkening sky. There were few neighbors. The nearest house was a quarter-mile away, but the people here proved friendly and unobtrusive. Ellen, an elderly artist who lived 2 estates away from me, sometimes dropped in for a cup of tea. We talked about books, about gardening, about life. Not once did she ask why I had moved here alone or where my children were, a delicacy I appreciated. After the tumultuous breakup with Fletcher and Martha, there was silence. They didn't call, didn't visit, as if I had truly ceased to exist for them. Sometimes I felt a pang of sadness. After all, Fletcher was my only son. But more often I was relieved. Life without the constant guilt and the need to justify myself was incredibly peaceful. I began to spend more time on myself. I enrolled in ceramics classes at the local art center, renewed old friendships with 2 former hospital colleagues. We met once a week at a small cafe in town, chatting, laughing, exchanging news. That May morning, I was just about to go to another such meeting. I was having breakfast on the veranda, enjoying the morning chill, when the phone rang. The number was not recognized. Hello? I answered cautiously. Norma, this is Patricia Donovan. We know each other through the hospital's charity committee. I had a hard time remembering this woman, the wife of one of the doctors I'd actually crossed paths with at a few events years ago. Yes, Patricia, of course, I said. To what do I owe the call? Oh, honey, I just wanted to see how you were doing. I heard you moved out of town. At your age, alone. Her voice was full of feigned concern. I'm fine, Patricia, I replied calmly. I'm enjoying the new house and garden. But your son is so worried, she continued. Fletcher says you've become forgetful. Sometimes you don't recognize people. Is that true? So that's it. Fletcher decided to work through mutual acquaintances, spreading rumors about my deteriorating mental state. I'm afraid Fletcher is exaggerating, I said, my voice growing colder. I have an excellent memory, and I'm fully aware of my actions. But he said you sold the apartment out of the blue and left without telling anyone. That's so unlike you, Norma. I told my son about selling the apartment and buying the house. Just because he didn't like my decision doesn't make it any less conscious. Of course it does, Patricia agreed hastily. It's just that we're all worried. Maybe you should see a specialist, just to check it out. Richard could recommend an excellent neurologist. I interrupted her. Thank you for your concern, Patricia, but I recently had a complete checkup. My health is perfectly fine, including my cognitive function. That was a small lie. I had a full checkup over a year ago. But after talking to Henry, I did make an appointment with a neurologist just to have the latest results on hand in case Fletcher decided to challenge my competency. Patricia's call was followed by others: a former housemate, a distant relative, even a minister from the church I sometimes attended. They all happened to hear about my move and just wanted to make sure I was okay. All mentioned Fletcher and his concerns about my mental health. The campaign was skillfully orchestrated. The calls came from people I knew, but not close enough to suspect them of direct collusion with my son. All of them sounded genuinely concerned, all of them offering help, which invariably amounted to a return to the city under Fletcher's care. On the fifth day of this telephone siege, there was a knock on the door. I was just finishing lunch when I saw through the window a familiar car in the driveway. Fletcher stood on the doorstep with a bouquet of flowers and a look of remorse on his face. "Mom," he began as soon as I opened the door, "I came to apologize." I silently stepped aside to let him into the house. He walked into the living room, looking around with ill-concealed surprise. "Nice," he said at last. "Cozy. I didn't think it would be so civilized." "Thank you," I said dryly. "What brings you here, Fletcher? Don't tell me it was just to apologize." He sighed, feigning humility. "You're right, Mom. I behaved terribly. I said a lot of things in anger. I was just shocked by your decision and overreacted. Is that why you tell everyone you know that I have dementia?" I asked bluntly. Fletcher froze for a moment, then shook his head. "I never said anything about dementia. I was just expressing concern. Your sudden move, your strange behavior." "What exactly is strange behavior, Fletcher? That I've decided to live my life the way I want, and not the way that suits you." He sat down on the couch, placing the bouquet on the coffee table. "Mom, let's not fight again. I've come to make up. I admit I was wrong to require you to sell the apartment. It's your life, your decision." "I'm glad you realize that," I replied, sitting down in the chair opposite. "Would you like some tea?" "I'd love some tea." He smiled with visible relief, as if the worst was over. While I made tea in the kitchen, Fletcher paced the living room, looking at pictures, books, knickknacks. I noticed him open the sideboard drawer and look through the papers, but I didn't say anything. There was nothing important in there. Electric bills, seed catalogs for the garden, recipes. "How are you doing with the house?" he asked when I returned with the tea. "Isn't it hard on your own?" "I manage quite well. I have a garden assistant who comes once a week for the heavy work. I manage the rest on my own." "And the money?" He tried to ask the question casually. "Selling the apartment, buying a house, renovating. It must have taken a heavy toll on your savings." "I'm financially secure, Fletcher," I replied calmly. "You have nothing to worry about." "I'm worried about you, Mom." He put a worried expression on his face. "What if you get sick? Who will take care of you?" "I have good health insurance and savings in case I need to hire a caregiver," I replied. "I've thought of everything." "What about a will?" he finally asked. "You mentioned that you changed it. May I ask how?" I sipped my tea and paused. "A will is a private matter, Fletcher. Let me just say that you're not completely disinherited, if that bothers you."
Of course it bothers me. He raised his voice, but he pulled himself together. I'm sorry, Mom. I just want to know that you're going to be okay. And yes, of course I'm worried about the inheritance too. It's only natural. Martha and I were counting on that money for the future. Your future, I clarified, not mine. He didn't say anything, and we drank tea in silence for a while. Then Fletcher started talking about his work, his new clients, his plans for the summer. He was impeccably polite, even offered to help with some minor repairs he'd noticed around the house. But I sensed falseness in every word he said, every gesture. It was not a visit from a loving son to his mother, but a scouting mission, an attempt to assess the situation, to find weaknesses, to gather information. When he finally left, promising to visit me more often, I was relieved. Playing the happy family game was more exhausting than open conflict.
3 days later, Martha showed up, unannounced, in the middle of the day while I was working in the garden. She looked gaunt, with dark circles under her eyes, as if she hadn't slept for several nights. Norma, she began, declining the tea. I've come to talk frankly. We sat down on the veranda. Martha twirled her wedding ring nervously on her finger. Fletcher and I are on the verge of divorce, she said at last. Everything's been going downhill since the apartment story. We're in debt. Creditors call every day. My business is on the verge of bankruptcy. I remained silent, waiting for her to continue. She sighed. I know what we did to you was wrong, pressured you, manipulated you. But we really are in a desperate situation. If you could help not all the money, just some of it, we could pay off our most urgent debts and save the marriage. Martha, I looked her straight in the eye. You and Fletcher are adults, capable of handling your own financial problems. I'm not going to save your marriage with my money. But you're his mother, she exclaimed. Don't you care what happens to your son? I do care, I replied calmly. But I don't believe that money will solve your problems. It will only delay the inevitable. You need to learn to live within your means and not take out loans against deals that don't exist. Martha jumped to her feet, her face contorted with anger. Is this how you take care of your family? Abandoning us in our time of need? And then you wonder why Fletcher says there's something wrong with you. What exactly is Fletcher saying? I asked, still calm, though my heart was racing. That you're not yourself, that you're forgetful, suspicious, making strange decisions, that you needed a guardian, she blurted out, and then covered her mouth with her hand as if she'd said too much. So that's what this is about. It wasn't just rumors about my supposed dementia. They were actually planning to get custody of me so they could get control of my finances. I think you should leave, Martha, I said quietly. Norma, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. She tried to take my hand, but I pulled away. Go away, now. After she left, I sat on the veranda for a long time, trying to calm down. Fletcher and Martha's plan was obvious. Spread rumors about my incapacity, gather evidence from people they knew, and then go to court to get custody. If they succeeded, they would gain complete control over my finances, my home, my life. The next day, I drove into town to meet my friends. Susan and Margaret were waiting for me at our usual cafe. As soon as I sat down at the table, Susan leaned over to me with a concerned look. Norma, do you know what's going on? Fletcher called me yesterday, asking if I'd noticed any signs of dementia. He said he was gathering information for a consultation with a psychiatrist. I sighed. Yes, I know. He's calling all our mutual acquaintances. But why? Margaret asked, perplexed. You look fine, and your memory is fine. Because I sold the apartment they were planning to take away from me and changed my will, I explained. Now they want to get custody of me so they can get control of my money. Susan and Margaret were shocked. Both had known Fletcher since they were children, remembered him as the sweet boy I'd raised alone after Robert's death. I mean, it's terrible, Susan exclaimed. You've got to do something. I've already contacted Henry, I said. I have an appointment this afternoon. Henry Summers listened to me talk about the visits from Fletcher and Martha, the calls from acquaintances, the custody plans. His usually good-natured face darkened. This is serious, Norma, he said. Custody is a last resort. But if the judge decides you're incapable of making informed decisions, the consequences could be disastrous. What am I supposed to do? I asked. First, we need medical reports, fresh ones, from reputable specialists, confirming that you're competent. You've already made an appointment with a neurologist. That's good. We'll add a psych consult and a general checkup with a general practitioner. He made notes in his notebook. Second, document all contact with Fletcher and Martha. Write down dates, content of conversations. If they call, try to record the conversation. It's legal in our state if one of the participants knows about the recording. And third? I asked, seeing that he was hesitating. Third, We might have to be proactive, file a countersuit for harassment and attempted fraud. We have evidence that they tried to take your property fraudulently. I don't want to sue my own son, Henry. I shook my head. I understand, he squeezed my hand. But sometimes the best defense is offense. Think about it. In the meantime, let's focus on medical reports and documentation. I returned home with a clear plan of action and a strange sense of determination. The fear I'd felt after talking to Martha had been replaced by a cold fury. They wanted to declare me incompetent, not because they were worried about my health, but to get my money. My own son was willing to strip me of my freedom and dignity for financial gain. That evening, I sat on the veranda, watching the sunset, and thought about how strangely life had turned. At 67, for the first time, I was truly fighting for my independence, not with illness, not with external circumstances, but with my own family, who were supposed to be my support and encouragement. The phone rang, interrupting my musings. Fletcher's number. I didn't answer, but I turned the recording on for voicemail, as Henry had advised. After the third ringtone, the answering machine went off. Mom, this is Fletcher. I'm worried about you. You've been kind of weird lately. Martha and I think you need to see a doctor. I can get you an appointment with a good specialist. Call me back, please. I erased the message and entered the information into the notebook I'd started keeping on Henry's advice. Date, time, content. Another piece of evidence for a case I hoped never to open. The siege had begun. But unlike in the past, when I'd given in to my son's demands out of guilt and motherly love, now I was ready to defend myself, not out of anger or revenge, but out of a simple desire to preserve my dignity and the right to live my life as I saw fit. October painted the hills around my house in gold and purple. It's been 6 months since I moved here, 6 months of my new, independent life. It's hard to believe that I once doubted my decision. Now this small house with a plot has become a real refuge, a place where I have finally found peace. My small vegetable garden is no longer just a plot of land. It has become a source of real pride. In the summer, I harvested my first crop of tomatoes, cucumbers, and herbs. Nothing compares to the taste of vegetables grown with my own hands. In the corner of the plot, I planted flowers, simple, unpretentious, but so bright. Now, in the fall, many of them have bloomed, but asters and chrysanthemums still delighted the eye. The house was also transformed. I gradually changed the furnishings, making them more comfortable and in keeping with my tastes. I painted the living room walls a warm peach color, hung new curtains, and arranged pots of potted plants on the windowsills. In the bedroom, there was a comfortable reading nook with a soft armchair and a floor lamp, where I spent evenings with a book. I found the previous owner's old tools in the shed, and I learned to do small repairs myself. I replaced a leaky faucet gasket, fixed a loose step on the porch, even fixed the hinges on a closet door. Each such small accomplishment brought a strange satisfaction, the feeling that I could take care of myself and my house without help. Neighbors became almost friends. Ellen, a painter who lived 2 estates away from me, would sometimes drop in for tea. We could talk for hours about books, art, gardening, or just sit in comfortable silence watching the birds at the feeder. Tom and Betty Greenwood, an elderly couple from across the street, would invite me over for Sunday lunches. Once, when I had the flu, Betty brought chicken soup and checked to see if I needed anything from the drugstore. The conflict with Fletcher was behind me. After my lawyer sent him a formal letter warning him of the legal consequences of trying to get custody of me, he backed off. The calls stopped. The concerned acquaintances stopped inquiring about my mental health. There was silence, not the oppressive silence of loneliness that I was so afraid of, but the calm, peaceful silence of freedom. Of course, sometimes I felt sad. After all, Fletcher was my only child, my only connection to Robert, to our past life. I remembered him as a little boy with serious blue eyes, remembered his first steps, his first words, his school successes. How had that inquisitive, affectionate child turned into a calculating, selfish man, ready to declare his own mother incompetent for the sake of money? At such moments, I took out an old photo album and flipped through the pages, looking at the faces in the pictures, trying to understand where and when everything went wrong. Maybe I'd spoiled him too much after his father died. Or, on the contrary, was I too strict, too demanding? Maybe he'd never forgiven me for failing to save Robert, for not seeing the first signs of illness, for not insisting that he see a doctor sooner.
But more often than not, I was relieved. It was as if a heavy weight had fallen from my shoulders, the weight of constant guilt, of having to conform to other people's expectations, of fear of disappointment. I could finally be myself, not have to explain my decisions, not have to apologize for my desires. It was a freedom I had probably never known in my life. On that October day, I went into town to get groceries. I usually shopped at a small store nearby, but once a month I went to the big supermarket to stock up on everything I needed. I was leisurely wandering between the aisles, checking the list, when I heard a familiar voice. Norma? Is that really you? I turned around and saw Martha. She looked different, her hair shorter, her clothes simpler, without the usual designer accessories. And something else had changed in her appearance. She seemed both more tired and calmer at the same time.
Hello, Martha. I nodded, not knowing what to expect. Our last meeting 6 months ago had ended in a near scandal. How are you? She asked, and her voice sounded genuinely interested. Fine, thank you. And you? She paused, as if deciding whether to be frank. I've been better. Fletcher and I are getting a divorce. I couldn't say I was surprised. Their marriage had always seemed to me like a marriage of convenience, based more on shared ambition than on deep feelings. I'm sorry, I said, and it was true. Divorce is always a painful process, even if it's for the best. It shouldn't be, Martha smiled weakly. It should have happened a long time ago. We've both been unhappy for years. There was an awkward pause. We stood in the middle of the supermarket, two women bound together by years of complicated relationships, but now almost strangers. Why don't we have coffee? Martha suddenly suggested it. If you have time. I hesitated. What did she want? Another attempt at manipulation? Or did she really need to talk? Okay, I finally agreed. Give me 15 minutes to finish shopping. We met at a small coffee shop across the street from the supermarket. Martha was already sitting at a table by the window when I walked in. She had a cup of untouched coffee in front of her. I ordered you a latte, she said. You like it, don't you? It surprised me that she remembered such a detail. Over the years of our relationship, Martha had rarely shown any interest in my preferences. Yes, thank you. I sat down across from her. So you're getting a divorce? She nodded. Yes, the process is already underway. We're selling the house, dividing the property. It's all pretty civilized as far as situations like this go. And your business? I asked, remembering how she talked about the impending bankruptcy.
I had to shut it down, Martha sighed. Too much debt, but I got a job at a big design firm. Less freedom, but a steady paycheck and no financial risks. She looked out the window, watching the people passing by. You know, Norma, I've always envied you. Me? I wondered. What's there to envy? Your independence, your ability to live alone and be happy. I was always afraid of being alone, always clinging to relationships, even if they made me unhappy. I was silent, not knowing what to say. Martha continued. After Robert's death, you didn't rush out to find a new husband. You didn't get depressed. You just went on with your life, working, taking care of the house, finding joy in the little things. I watched you and thought, I wish I had that kind of strength. I don't think it's strength, I said thoughtfully. It's more a habit of finding happiness where you are. Rob taught me that.
And then Fletcher and I came along? Martha grinned bitterly. And ruined your peace. You're my family, I said simply. No, Norma. She shook her head. We weren't your family. We were parasites, using you, sucking your money, your time, your energy, and gave you nothing in return. Her candor was surprising. It wasn't the Martha I knew, calculating, always thinking about profit. Why are you telling me all this now? I asked. She stared at her cup for a long moment, then looked up. Because the divorce made me reevaluate a lot of things in my life, and I realized I owed you an apology for everything that Fletcher and I did to you, for the way we've treated you all these years. Thank you, I said quietly. It means a lot to me. Don't thank me, Martha grinned bitterly. I don't deserve thanks. And don't think I've become a saint. It's just that when you face loneliness, you start to appreciate the people who could have been there for you differently. We didn't talk. Outside the window of the coffee shop, it was a normal city day. People going about their business, cars passing by, clouds slowly drifting across the fall sky. What about Fletcher? I finally asked. How's he dealing with the divorce? The usual blaming everyone but himself. Martha shrugged. You, me, the economy, the government, everyone but his own crazy financial decisions and selfishness. He's always been like that, I sighed. Even as a child, he couldn't admit his guilt, always making excuses, shifting responsibility. You know what the saddest part is? Martha looked me straight in the eye. He really loves you, in his own way, of course, in a twisted, selfish way, but he does, and that makes his behavior even more pathological. I didn't know what to say. The idea that Fletcher loved me and yet was willing to declare me incompetent for money seemed absurd. He'll never forgive you for choosing yourself over him, Martha said quietly, because he would never have chosen you himself. The words were unexpectedly painful, though I'd suspected something like that for a long time. It was one thing to guess, and quite another to hear it out loud. I have to go. Martha glanced at her watch. Thank you for talking to me, Norma. I'm not apologizing. What we did was unforgivable. I just want you to know that I realize we were wrong, and I'm glad you found the strength to stand up to us. She stood up, hesitating for a moment, as if she wanted to hug me. But then she changed her mind and just touched my arm lightly. I watched her walk away, a slender figure in a simple gray coat, so different from the old Martha with her designer clothes and perfect styling. Perhaps the divorce had really changed her. Or maybe she had always been capable of such honesty, but the family dynamics had kept her from bringing out her best qualities. I returned home in a strange mood. Talking to Martha had stirred up memories, made me relive the pain of betrayal. But at the same time, it brought a kind of closure, the completion of an unfinished story. I sorted out my shopping, prepared a light supper, and went out into the garden. The October evening was cool, but not yet cold. The air smelled of fallen leaves and damp earth. I sat down on a bench under an old apple tree, wrapped myself in a blanket, and just breathed, enjoying the peace and quiet. My cell phone vibrated in my pocket. I pulled it out and saw a message from Fletcher, the first in months. Mom, we need to talk. A lot has changed. I want to apologize in person. Can I come over on Sunday? I stared at the screen, not knowing how I felt. Relief, suspicion, hope, fear. Part of me wanted to say yes immediately. This was my son, my blood, no matter what. The other part warned of another trap. Perhaps the divorce had put Fletcher in a difficult financial position, and he saw me as a source of money again. Martha's words echoed in my head. He'll never forgive you for choosing yourself over him, because he would never have chosen you himself. I set the phone aside without answering. The message wasn't going anywhere. I could think about it, weigh the pros and cons, make a decision tomorrow or the day after. Right now, I just wanted to sit in my garden, watch the last rays of sunlight color the hills golden, and listen to the silence. The silence no longer seemed frightening or lonely. It was filled with sounds, the rustling of leaves, the singing of the last autumn birds, the distant barking of a dog from a neighboring farm. It was a living silence, giving space to think, to breathe, to live. I leaned back on the bench and breathed deeply of the cool evening air. At 67, I had finally learned the most important thing: to choose myself. Not out of selfishness or callousness, but out of the simple understanding that I too have the right to happiness, to peace, to live by my own rules. I could always respond to Fletcher. Right now, I just wanted to be here, and now, in my garden, in my house, in my new life, that I had finally begun to build for myself.